You are not unlucky in love. Your nervous system is just programmed to crave chaos. Have you ever felt like your romantic life is just this endless repeating loop of extreme highs and absolutely devastating lows? Well, today's explainer is a deep dive into the psychology behind why our dating lives so often feel turbulent, confusing, and honestly, just completely exhausting. We so often treat our painful dating patterns like they're personal character flaws, or maybe just sheer bad luck. But research actually shows us that these patterns are deeply ingrained biological survival protocols. They're basically programs that were installed before you were even old enough to have a say in the matter. So really, it's not you, it's your nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Section 1. Your nervous system craves chaos. To really understand the why behind all this chaos, we have to look back to a foundational concept developed back in the 1950s by psychologist John Bowlby. It's called attachment theory. Basically, this is the lasting psychological connectedness we form in infancy. You see, the way our primary caregivers responded to our needs literally hardwired our brains. If a caregiver was consistent, we learned that connection was safe. But if they were inconsistent or emotionally distant, our brains had to build defenses just to survive. And today, decades later, those exact same early survival strategies are literally acting as the operating systems for our romantic lives. Section 2. The 3 adult attachment styles. So, what operating system are you running on? In the general population, about 60% of people have a secure attachment style, which sounds great, right? But here's the catch when it comes to modern dating. Securely attached people tend to pair off and stay together, which means the active dating pool is heavily populated by the remaining insecure styles. We're talking roughly 20% anxious, 15% avoidant, and a smaller 5% disorganized, which is kind of like a chaotic mix of both. Let's look at the baseline for healthy interdependence first, the secure attachment style. These folks usually received really consistent, benevolent care in childhood. Because they learned early on that love is reliable, their nervous systems don't just completely panic when faced with relationship stress. They're comfortable with intimacy, they actually trust their partners, and crucially, they communicate their needs directly, without playing games. Okay, moving on to the anxious attachment style. This pattern typically stems from inconsistent caregiving. Sometimes warm, sometimes completely absent. This unpredictability creates an anxious nervous system that is just constantly scanning the environment for threats. These individuals crave intense closeness, but they harbor this deep, terrifying fear of abandonment. They are hypervigilant. Like, literally, a slight shift in a partner's texting tone can trigger a full-body alarm that screams, "They are leaving me." And then we have the avoidant attachment style. Often raised by emotionally distant caregivers, these individuals learned really early on that they could only rely on themselves. Because of that, they equate emotional intimacy with the loss of independence or engulfment. When they face relational stress, their sheer survival instinct is to withdraw, shut down, or create physical space. And it's absolutely vital to understand here, this emotional distance isn't cruelty, it's just a learned protection strategy. Section 3. The delayed text message. Now, theory is great, but let's see how this actually plays out in the real world with a highly relatable micro-scenario, the absolute anxiety of waiting for a text back. It's the exact same scenario, a delayed text, but it triggers 3 completely different nervous system responses. The secure person stays calm, figures their partner's just busy, and regulates their own emotions. The anxious person, they experience sheer internal panic. Their abandonment fear is triggered, which often leads to what we call protest behaviors, like double texting or picking a random fight just to get a reaction. Meanwhile, the avoidant person senses the pressure of the interaction, feels totally engulfed, and actively creates even more distance to self-soothe. So I have to ask, which reaction felt most like yours? If you just realized your attachment style, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments if you lean anxious or avoidant. Understanding your own baseline is literally the very first step to changing your romantic future. Section 4. The anxious avoidant check. Now, what happens when these different styles meet out in the wild? Well, it creates a biologically addictive cycle where opposites attract and then violently collide. The neurobiology here is just fascinating. On one side, the anxious partner pursues closeness, but that very pursuit triggers the avoidant partner's fear of engulfment, so the avoidant partner withdraws to get some space. And guess what? That withdrawal instantly triggers the anxious partner's deepest fear of abandonment, causing them to pursue even harder. It's this closed, self-reinforcing loop where each person's coping strategy perfectly activates the other person's deepest terror. And you might be wondering, why is it so incredibly hard to just walk away from this trap? 2 words: intermittent reinforcement. This push-pull cycle acts exactly like a slot machine for your brain. The unpredictable cycle of cold distance, followed by a sudden warm reconnection, absolutely floods your brain with dopamine. This creates a traumatic bond. Your brain gets hooked on the relief of reconnecting, tragically mistaking all that biological chaos and dysregulation for genuine romantic chemistry. Section 5. Earning your secure attachment. Okay, if you recognize yourself in that trap, take a deep breath. We are now going to pivot to the solution. The incredible news from clinical psychology is that your brain is highly resilient. Enter the concept of earned secure attachment. This is the clinical term for achieving secure, stable relationship patterns through intentional work, even if your childhood experiences totally wired you for anxiety or avoidance. Thanks to neuroplasticity, you actually have the power to rewrite those old survival protocols. You really can earn the security you weren't given. So, how do we actually do this? Well, based on cognitive behavioral therapy and attachment research, here are the actionable steps to start rewiring your brain. Step 1. Build your self-worth completely outside of your romantic relationships. That way, a missed text isn't a literal threat to your identity. Step 2. Develop self-soothing skills like breathwork to regulate your own nervous system when you get triggered. Step 3. Recognize your protest behaviors or your urge to withdraw and just pause before acting on them. Step 4. Communicate your needs directly. Actually say, I feel anxious when we don't talk, instead of acting out. And step 5, practice tolerating relational uncertainty without spiraling into a total panic. Look, this transformation does not happen overnight. Rewriting decades of nervous system programming is a gradual, sometimes messy process. It requires immense patience and, honestly, very often the support of a licensed therapist. But remember this. Every single time you choose vulnerability over defensiveness, every time you state a boundary instead of just shutting down, you are physically building new, healthier neural pathways in your brain. We've covered a massive amount of psychological ground today, taking you all the way from the origins of your childhood attachment to the actual neuroscience of toxic relationship loops, and finally to the actionable steps for earning your security. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to take with you. Knowing what you know now about your nervous system, will you choose the familiar chemistry of chaos, or will you embrace the quiet courage of secure love? The choice is entirely yours. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and we'll see you in the next explainer.